Hey friends, welcome to art class. Now, for third, fourth, and fifth graders, today we are using some of the materials that hopefully you were able to pick up at school this last week. If you were not able to pick up the materials that I left for you, that's okay. I will show you how you can still do this project without them. But today what we're going to be using is a piece of paper or your sketchbook if you got it. Something like a straight edge or a ruler that has a flat edge that you can use to trace. A pencil, of course. If you have a marker, that's awesome. You don't have to have a marker because I know not everyone does. And some watercolors. Mine are kind of messy, but yours should be brand new, hopefully, if you were able to pick them up. If you don't have your watercolors, that's okay. I will show you how you can still make this artwork look pretty cool without them. Now, the other thing is, if you're using watercolors, you need water. So, go and fill up a cup of water. When you're filling your water, I would suggest don't fill it all the way to the top. Just fill it about halfway or a little bit more than halfway. That way, you're less likely to spill it or splash it around when you're rinsing your brush. Keep your water close so that you can use it, but be careful not to knock it on your devices. I'm going to keep my water way on the other side of the table so that I'm not in danger of spilling it on my device. Before we paint, I have to give you directions on how we're going to sketch our picture, right? Today, we're talking about crystals. I know, it's really exciting. And believe it or not, we're going to be painting some. Now, did you know that scientists can guess what a crystal is made out of by looking at its shape? Pretty crazy. Does anyone know what a molecule is? A molecule is a teeny tiny little piece of something. And depending on what kinds of atoms, those little dots, make the molecules make different types of substances like water or salt. So different molecules stick together in very specific ways. Scientists will memorize the shapes of these different types of molecules. And so they'll know by looking at a crystal, they can guess by its shape what it's made out of. Isn't that cool? So if you see a molecule like this, we know that this is salt, right? What do you think a salt crystal would look like before it's crumpled down into nothing? Let's see. Isn't that crazy? Those are salt crystals before they're ground up into little pieces. So a scientist could look at those crystals and say, hey, I'm pretty sure those are salt crystals because they are cubes. So just a fun fact. Now, as artists, we are also going to be looking at the details on crystals. Now, crystals, when we draw them, are made of a bunch of different polygons. Does anyone know what a polygon is? A polygon is a shape with multiple straight sides. So poly means many, and gon is usually associated with a shape, right? So when you say polygon, it's a shape with multiple sides. Now, when we are drawing our crystals, we're going to have a lot of polygons. So that's going to be one of your objectives today. I'm going to show you your other objective really quick. We're going to start with our pencil, and we're going to be plotting some points that we can connect. And before you freak out, it's not that hard. It's actually pretty easy. But when you're drawing your dots, I want them to be little tiny, because almost every time I teach this, there's a kid who does this. I do not want dots like that. Please don't do that. Instead, when I'm showing you your dots, I want you to just make little tiny dots like that you can erase. Now, mine are going to be a little bit bigger because I want you to be able to see them. But when you are making your dots, make sure they're so tiny you can barely see them. All right? So we're going to start by drawing a dot in the top middle of our paper. Once you draw that dot, we're going to go a little lower. So I'm going to go down. And I'm going to put one dot on either side. So 1, 2 dots. So now we have one on the middle at the top, and then 2 a little further down. They don't have to look exactly like mine. You can put yours a little bit further down than mine. That's fine too. Once you have these 3 dots, we're going to go down, and I want you to draw a smiley face with your finger at the bottom of the page. Not with your pencil, but with your finger. Now, where you're drawing that smiley face, I want you to draw 4 or 5 dots, all right? So almost like a snowman smiley face. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I'm gonna leave it at 4. So now we have our 3 top and our 4 or 5 on the bottom. This is where we are going to start to use our straight edge. If you have a ruler is a great thing to use. I'm just going to use a piece of paper because I don't have a ruler with me today. And so I'm going to find a paper that is nice and straight. And I'm going to very carefully connect my outside dots. I'm only connecting them to the dots right next to them right now because we'll be adding the inside of the crystal in a minute. So take a minute, hold your straight edge between your 2 points, hold it nice and still, and draw that line, all right? I'll do it again. I'll hold it nice and still, keep my straight edge solid with one hand, and draw my line with the other. I'm going to do that for every single line until I have the outside of my crystal. Alrighty. Now that I have all of my dots connected, I have the outside shape of my crystal. Now, what I want you to do before we do anything else is I want you to draw 4 or 5 random dots somewhere in the middle. Now, I don't want them all to be close together. So what you shouldn't do is just draw a bunch of little dots really close together like that. What I want you to do instead is make them random, scatter them around. So I'll put one over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe I'll put one over here, 5, all right? So they're spread out, they're not super close together. Now, our first objective is to create some polygons. So this is the tricky part, but it's actually not too bad. So what you're going to do is you're going to start connecting these dots to the corners, but I don't want you to just draw it because it's really hard to get straight lines, and most generally, crystals have straight edges. So you're going to keep using that straight edge, and you're going to start connecting those dots to the corners and to each other. So this one, I have a triangle, right? Connecting another one. It's kind of a wild, almost like a rhombus. Here's another polygon. I think I might split that rhombus into a couple of triangles, so I'll do that real quick. Alrighty. And I'm just going to use this straight edge to help myself make more lines and connect my dots to each other and to the corners. Remember, yours isn't going to look exactly like mine, and that's okay because in nature, crystals rarely look the same as each other. They're all a little bit different. All right, I think I'm going to stop there. If you want to make more lines, you can. I'm going to keep mine simple so it's easier to color when the time comes. Maybe I'll add one last little line here. If you finish this and you have something like a marker or a Sharpie, you can go over these lines with your Sharpie. Now, I would suggest don't just freehand it. Keep using your ruler or your straight edge for these because even if you're tracing, it's really hard to get those perfect straight lines, even for me, and I have been doing art a lot longer than you guys. So if you're using a marker, make sure you're still using that straight edge, just like me. All right. Once you have your crystal, and I forgot one line. Once you have your crystal traced with your marker, if you have one, you can go in and erase your pencil marks and your dots. where the watercolors start coming in. Now, I have a few rules because we want to keep these nice, right? So first rule, when you're rinsing your brush, I want you to rinse it gently. Don't smash it on the bottom of the cup because that messes up the bristles. You want to keep it nice, right? So another rule, I'm going to back up away from my computer before I do this. Don't do it like this because water just got everywhere. So you want to make sure your workspace is nice and clean. So when you rinse your brush, do it slowly and gently, and then, so it's not dripping everywhere, wipe it on the side so it drips off, right? You probably already know this, but I want to make sure you guys are keeping your work area clean. Now, the other thing is, when you are using your watercolors, you can see mine are kind of messy, but the colors aren't mixed, right? Except for the green because my little girl got into it. When you guys are using your colors, always rinse your brush in between colors so that you can keep your colors nice and clean. Now, if you want to mix them, you can use the little palette over here. That's what I use. That's why it's a little colorful, because I sometimes use that for mixing my colors together. But I'm always rinsing my brush in between, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prep our palette. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my water and I'm going to put a few drops in each of my colors, making sure that I'm rinsing my brush every time. Now, your paintbrushes will look a little different from mine, and that's because you guys have actual watercolor paintbrushes. Mine disappeared, so I'm just using this yucky one, but it's okay because it'll still work. Now that my watercolors have water in them, I'm going to let them sit for a moment, so I'm going to slide them to the side, and we're going to prep our picture. So, when we are working on our crystal, we want to practice creating value because we want our crystal to look 3D. So in order to create value, we want one side to look darker and one side to look lighter. So I'm going to teach you guys a trick for doing this with watercolors. It's called wet on wet watercolor technique. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our clean paintbrush with water, and we are going to fill one of our shapes with a puddle, all right? And it's a little harder with copy paper, but it'll still work. So you guys see how it's wet? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get one of my colors, and I'm just going to do a line. You guys see how the color is starting to spread a little bit? I'm going to get just a little bit more. And I'm just doing a line on one side. Now, am I mixing it all together? No, I'm just letting the color move where it wants to move, right? So I'm going to let that one dry for a little bit. So instead of painting right next to it so that it all mixes together, I'm going to pick another spot. So this one is not touching anything that is wet. So I'm going to work on this one next, so I'll fill it with a puddle of water. And then, rinsing my brush, I'm going to pick another color and do a line. Once again, it's going to start spreading a little bit on its own. I might need to help it a little bit, but I don't want to mix it all the way across because I want those watercolors to do the work for me so that one side is dark and the other side's a little lighter. If you want, making sure you rinse your brush, you can add a little bit of yellow on one side to make it look like it blends into another color. So if you want to add multiple colors so it looks like your colors are blending, you can do that. But just make sure you're rinsing your brush in between. So as you guys are working, try to pick the shapes that aren't too close to the others. And now you see, since I used a shape that's close to this one, see how the blue is kind of bleeding into it? That's all right, it's not the end of the world, but that is what will happen if you let the water touch. So I'm going to use another color. Ooh, the red is spreading really nice. See that? It's pretty cool. So I'm going to add a little more water to help it to move around. Add a little bit more of that red line. And I'll add a little bit of orange so that it looks like it kind of fades. So now, once again, we're working on that value, right? We're going from dark to light. And I know right now it looks gray because my table is black and the paper's wet, but when it dries, this gray area on the side will be white. So we're going to keep doing that for all of our shapes. For those of you who do not have your watercolors yet, no worries. You can use whatever writing tool you have. We're still going to add that value going from light to dark, making those polygons come together to make that 3D crystal. I'll show you what I mean. With my writing tool, I'm going to press extra hard on one edge of my shape or polygon. Then, the further across I get, I'm going to press lighter and softer until I'm barely touching it and it gets really light. I think I'm going to blend it a little bit more because I don't think that I did press to medium enough. So I'm going to press a little bit harder in the middle. And then bam, do you guys see how it goes from dark to light? I'm going to do the same thing with a bunch of my crayons. Here's your objectives. Number 1, I can use a straight edge to draw at least 5 polygons in my crystal. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have a lot more than that, so we're good. Number 2, I can color each of my polygons using value and going from dark to light. Dark to light. En español, número 1. Yo puedo usar una regla para dibujar al menos 5 polígonos en mi cristal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Número 2. Yo puedo colorear cada uno de mis polígonos usando valor y yendo de oscuro a claro. De oscuro a claro.